Michigan versus everybody.
I half agree with what you just said.
It's the arrival. I came in the league, went straight for the title.
Touchdown! Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvelous. Gets past Ransom. Donovan Edwards. Touchdown. The Don.
There's nothing quite like the game.
Michigan versus Ohio State.
This is The Rivalry, sponsored by Elevated Integrity Construction.
It's the Rivalry Podcast. Jace, JP, Michigan, Ohio State. What else would it be? This game is next week.
I'm already sick to my stomach.
I would like to barf right now. While we get ready to barf, why don't we run a little bit of Wheel Route and break the ice? Thanks to the J Company for sponsoring Wheel Route. Fall in love with your home all over again at thejaecompany.com. Make sure you follow on social media. You can watch right now as well at Rival Pod on YouTube and across social channels. What team has surprised you the most this year? Ooh, there's a lot of options for this.
You want me to go first?
Yeah,
I know you're going to hate me because I always do this.
Okay.
Because I feel like I've got two teams. And I'll go opposite ends. I'll go team that has surprised me, that they've disappointed me enough. And I'll go Penn State. I was super high on them at the beginning. And I'm not going to rip on them because defensively, I still think they're a great team. But that offense is atrocious. And we're going to obviously talk more about this when we get to the Michigan side of things. But the offense is way worse than I thought they were going to be this year. And so it's been a little surprising to me to be able to see that. And then I feel like another team that could easily be thrown up in there is USC.
That's a good one.
I feel like
that one. I'm into that one.
I feel very bad for Caleb Williams because dude is just an absolute baller, and they play a tough schedule. And it's like you go into these big games and you want to pick them so badly, and you did as your stupid genius last week.
Yeah, but I wasn't happy about it.
Well, but it was a good game. It wasn't. But that just seems to be the storyline. Is these big games, they just defensively do not have it.
Yeah. I'm going to go Notre Dame.
Okay.
Notre Dame, especially the hype around Sam Hartman. Big believer in Notre Dame. Big believer in Sam Hartman. You know, the loss to Ohio State is one thing, but then you've dropped two more games, including
they're 7-3.
They got bludgeoned by a 4-loss Clemson team. I mean,
Clemson is, I'm not saying Clemson's good, but they're
a 4-loss Clemson team. This isn't Clemson, top 10 Clemson from years past. This is kind of mid Clemson right now.
But they're one of those weird teams that's dangerous every time you play them.
They are, but it doesn't make me feel any better about losing to Ohio State at home, losing to Louisville, losing to Clemson, and barely squeaking by Duke. It just, thankfully for Sam Hartman gets to go play Wake Forest this weekend, so good for him. He gets a little homecoming trip, and
how funny!
I assume gets to win.
Wake Forest, you have the chance to do the funniest thing ever and just win.
Big Wake Forest. As a week-long Wake Forest fan, go
love
Deeks
the Demon
whatever.
Deacons.
Let's talk Ohio
State.
Demon time. We're an arm of the Christian radio station. I don't think we can say it's demon time. The Demon Deacons, if you're not familiar, is you get it. It's fine. You're watching this podcast for a reason. Let's talk about Ohio State. So Ohio State gets the dumpster fire that is Michigan State.
Oh, man.
I mean, it's obvious, but just the talent gap
it was on show.
Wide open.
Any corner that tried to cover Marvin Harrison, good luck. Dude was just a baller. This is exactly the kind of game you wanted as a Buckeye fan. And I know there are some people, I was honestly even in this same camp, I wanted to see them just foot on the gas the whole game.
Yeah.
It was that mentality where in the second half we kind of just slowed off a little bit, took our starters out.
It was like a 3-0 second half score?
Yeah, it was 38-0 or something at half. Like it was
35-3 at the half,
35-3,
38-3 to finish.
Yeah, I mean it was nothing. Kyle McCord looked great. He had some really, really nice throws. Travion Henderson, I don't want to say I ripped on him, but like he's been frustrating at times to watch because of his injuries. To me, it's just you see him out there on the offense, and it makes him so much more dynamic. His speed, his versatility has just been a huge boost to the offense.
And I think honestly, like even more than like stat lines, like he rushed for like 60 something. Like the stat line wasn't even that great.
No,
but I think you hit it though. The dynamic now if I'm a defense, now I have to account for the run game where without him, I really don't.
And that's the main point. I mean, Chip Trayanum was serviceable. Mayan Williams was serviceable.
Xavier Johnson got a few carries.
Xavier Johnson,
40 or something.
Yeah, I mean, you had guys that can get it done, but nobody is coming close in the talent level as Travion Henderson. And so getting that back, he's been a huge lift to that offense since he's returned. Marvin Harrison doing Marvin Harrison things. Cade Stover getting on the action. Kyle McCord threw some dots. I mean, he had one of his best games of the year, and I talked about it last week on the podcast. This was the kind of game he needed to have to be able going up towards the game that is oh so close. And I hope that he carries that over against Minnesota this upcoming week, because these are the games you need to get that confidence going. You need to get all your receivers back. Abuka was back, which I do want to touch on this a little bit because I am curious now with him. So he came back. He's had a couple of injuries this year that's kept him off the field. I would say prior to the season, he was a first-round pick. Now I'm not 100% sold on it. He is only a junior. Realistically,
he could come back.
Realistically, I mean, it's not going to happen, but Marvin is also a junior. I genuinely
Marv's gone.
Marv's gone.
You know that, right?
I know. Okay. I haven't come to reality with it yet, but he's gone.
I just want to make sure you knew that.
Don't say it out loud. Emeka Abuko, though, realistically, he could come back next year, and I think he should.
Well, he comes back. He's going to be the clear number one guy.
He's the clear number one guy. Right. He's only got about 300 something yards on the season. I think this season has taken him out of that first round spot. So I think it's wise for him to come back next year and be the guy and be the leader in that room, and then he will be a number one pick if he stays healthy. He'll be a first round guy.
He's a day two, late second, early third round pick right
now. Currently, yes.
And I agree, like, as much as it pains me, like if we're going to be objective here, like he has the talent, like he's got a high ceiling.
He's a first round talent.
He's not going to be Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave or Marv in the NFL, but he's going to be more than serviceable.
Yeah, 100%. The key thing for this game, though, I mean, because it goes without saying, Ohio State, had they kept their foot on the gas, would have put up 50 on this team. I mean, the offense was not slowed down whatsoever. The thing that makes me a little nervous, the injury bug has seemed to hit. It may be the worst time. Yep. And I don't know how serious or extensive some of these are, but it's two key guys. I mean, you've had weird issues with Abuka throughout the year. Henderson was missing some games. This past game, you missed your leader on defense in Tommy Eichenberg. You also had been without Denzel Burke a little bit. Lathan Ransom, who last year we kind of ripped on after the Michigan game. He had a couple plays where it was just he slipped or was lost and gave up huge plays. Dude has been a leader on defense this year and has been one of the better players. And then the one that I think hurts almost as much as Eichenberg is Josh Proctor. I mean, the games we've been able to see in person, you can see his energy on the field. The Penn State game, I genuinely think they lose that game if they don't have Josh Proctor. Yeah. Not because
I mean, Josh Proctor made some huge plays.
Same thing with the Maryland game. He was the only guy out there. Not saying they all didn't have energy, but he was getting the crowd hyped up. You could tell that he was ready to go from the time they stepped on the field. And I think he's been a vocal leader on that. And those are all core guys that I go into the Michigan game, and you absolutely need them. You need every single one of them to be able to beat Michigan this year.
Can you imagine not having like a Marvin Harrison or something for that game, like a Heisman caliber guy, and still like beating your rival by 3 scores? Can you imagine what that would feel like?
I did, because we didn't have Smith and Jigba for last year. So
I'm referencing Blake Corum for those who aren't paying attention. No,
he ain't winning it this year.
Did Ryan Day? I know he addressed some of the injuries, and I don't remember on some of the other ones. I don't believe Eichenberg's is the long term.
His shouldn't be. Denzel Burke shouldn't be.
Now Lathan Ransom, I believe he said might be a longer term injury.
Yes, and that's the one that makes me most nervous.
That's very coach speak and very cloudy, but typically, and this is just gut instinct here. Mm-hmm. Typically, because coaches tend to be cloudy in their language because they don't want to give anybody, it's the classic Jim Harbaugh, I'm going to keep the depth chart until I have to sort of thing.
Yeah.
When a coach is already saying, it might be a little more long term, that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
That to me sounds like, if we make the postseason, meaning playoff, obviously a bowl game, but if we make the postseason, maybe. Yeah. That's what that sounds like to me. And I hope that's a big loss.
I hope some of it. I mean, I think realistically with Eichenberg, with Proctor, with Denzel Burke, Abuka obviously was out on the field this past Saturday. those guys, I think it was more precautionary because realistically, you clearly didn't need them to dominate Michigan State. I would love to see all of those guys for Michigan. I think sit them if you need the rest against Minnesota. You've got to have a good chunk of those. If you're missing one of them, sure, you've got to have a good chunk of those guys ready to go. So if they're nursing something even small.
To be clear, you're suggesting that you don't need to be full strength to beat Minnesota?
I would say no.
Okay, cool. Minnesota comes to town.
They do. 4:00, which is maybe the worst time for you to possibly put a game.
If you are in a 4:00 slot, you know that you're going to have a bad time.
Yep, and they will. I have Ohio State 35, Minnesota 10.
Wow, we're so close.
Are we really?
38-10.
Okay, I almost went that.
I'll give
I almost went that.
Fielding, which what a name for a kicker too.
Yeah,
like fielding.
Could it be more perfect?
38-10. There's nothing. I have nothing good to say about Minnesota.
Yeah.
Kelly Ekmanis is sporadic. He's all over the place. The reason I give him 10 because you could nitpick and go, well, come on, Jace, come on, JP. Like the Minnesota's offense is bad. Yeah, but you know what? Like Kelly Ekmanis has the likelihood to throw a couple bombs and catch somebody out of position or whatever. They will find a way to get 10 points and make it look better than it is.
Ohio State hasn't really given up any big plays though. So I don't know if that'll be there. I could just see a garbage time. Starters are out again. You're trying to stay healthy heading up to the game. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if this was like 24-0 at half or something weird like that, 24-3. And then they come out and it's just a slow burn.
It's going to be so sleepy.
It will be.
Have something else to do. This is a good one for like you're prepping the house for family to come over.
You know
whatever.
Put up your Christmas decorations.
No, because that's
put the tree up.
Wait for after Thanksgiving.
Put the tree
to do
up.
That. Minnesota has no shot in this game, and it's like I wish I could say something else about them.
No, they're bad at this point of the year. You know what you're going to get.
Good, and yet technically Minnesota could still win the Big Ten West,
which makes me furious. Furious that Iowa, I think after Iowa beat Rutgers this past week, they clinched at least a share of the West.
Technically, yes, because they've got 5 wins. Everybody else has 3 at the most, and there's like 4 teams.
Yeah, so they've got a share of it. That doesn't mean they're going to go to the Big Ten Championship.
It does not. So Iowa would have to lose out, and one of those 3-win teams would have to win out, and then it depends.
It's going to be Iowa. Iowa's going to go. We're going to have to watch Iowa in the Big Ten Championship.
Let me put it this way: if your rival, so for you, Michigan, for me, Ohio State, if your rival is going to the Big Ten Championship game, which Big Ten West team would you want them to have to play? And it'd be Iowa for me.
Yeah,
I'd want to see McCord try and play the defense.
But I just don't think that's
no. It wouldn't matter.
It won't matter. It won't matter. They're bad.
I'm saying if you lose the game and you have to send your rival to Indy, I don't want you guys to get to go play Nebraska.
Well, nobody wants that, but honestly, nobody's going to want to watch the Big Ten Championship game, period, because it's going to be bad. It is so lopsided. I can't wait till they just abolish these.
A year ago, when McNamara transferred, I made the joke that McCarthy and McNamara for the Big Ten Championship confirmed. I realize he's injured, but also...
Yeah, that would have been a very good storyline.
McNamara and all against McCarthy and company would have been really... really fun, but it doesn't matter.
It won't matter. And whoever goes out of the West is going to get absolutely smacked by Ohio State or Michigan.
As is tradition.
Absolutely.
There's something to be said for tradition. That's all I'm going to say. Hey, on social media at Rival Pod, if you're not watching there already on YouTube, you can. Instagram and Twitter, we're trying to cover, and this is where social media, especially Twitter, is very helpful, is with the Michigan saga with Big Ten and NCAA and whatever, all that changes so much. So if you've listened and thought, why aren't they addressing it more? It's because it changes by the moment, it feels like.
And if we let Jace go on and on for hours about this podcast would never end.
There's not time in the day, okay? Twitter can happen at any time, day or night. It's amazing. So be sure to check us out there. Also consider becoming a Patreon subscriber.
Yeah, huge.
We've got stickers, we've got T-shirts, we've got exclusive content. We write blogs each week. Some of them are free, some of them are exclusive for Patreon subscribers
Jace
only.
Just copies and pastes what he writes in his daily journal. It's great.
I do. Excuse me. It's called a vision board.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
It's a diary. It's got feathers.
Dear diary, JP was mean to me again.
It's
the
glittery.
It's
glittery and has feathers on it. So
I told you that in the Tree of Trust. What are you talking about? So consider becoming a Patreon subscriber as well. That helps us get better content, helps us say yes to opportunities like Big Ten Championship, College Football Playoff, and it just continues to help grow this podcast, and we appreciate that. We're also very grateful for our friends at Elevated Integrity Construction. They've been sponsoring the podcast for a while now. Aaron Carroll and his team do a phenomenal job. As you start looking towards building projects, whether it's your church, your home, your business, they'll walk you through the process. There's no guesswork. The design element as well. They do it all. Find them at elevatedintegrity.com, elevatedintegrity.com. Now, you mentioned Rutgers.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do Rutgers to the Rose Bowl, which again is a playoff game. And I don't want to say that they're not able to make it anymore.
No, they aren't. But call a spade a spade. It is
a tough one. A tough one for
this.
I'm gonna move the helmet into the middle here for this segment.
That's going to fall for sure. That's going to fall for sure. You know what?
Fair.
This was one of those games. I went into the season or went into this weekend thinking this is.
They can beat Iowa.
They can beat Iowa. This was a game back in the day when Rutgers would have games like this. I would go in confident because they were talented enough that they could win these games. And they just laid an egg. Their offense was atrocious. It was one of the worst offensive performances I've seen all year. Gavin Wimsatt was ineffective. Kyle Monangai, who I thought at first they were talking about him potentially sitting out. He didn't really do anything. And I know Iowa's defense is good, but they are a bad team.
Yeah.
And Rutgers should have been able to make it more competitive. Losing, I think it was 22-0 final score.
Yeah, that's not
Ain't
good.
it. That's not going to get the job done. You've got to figure something out. Defensively, you were still in it. That wasn't a bad defensive performance by Rutgers. But when your offense is not moving the ball whatsoever, your defense is going to get tired. I do not blame the defense whatsoever. This was solely an offensive loss.
So the Rose Bowl is obviously
out.
The Sherrone meter is 0 out of 5, right? It has to.
Technically, yes. But for the season, they still have Penn State this weekend. Then they play Maryland to close the season.
Which Maryland's a winnable
So they
game.
could still. You just never know at this point. So I think.
Penn State, a winnable game?
In my heart of hearts, I wanted to say it, but it is at Beaver Stadium, so that will not happen.
Because I'm just saying that if you won those two games, we're talking about an 8-4 Rutgers team, and we're talking about like a trip to the Capital One Bowl or the Outback Bowl, or whatever.
And I think
you're
next
talking
year
about a Florida bowl game.
Next year will be the big test because you could potentially have Monangai back. You'll have Gavin Wimsatt back. I saw a good point on Twitter where somebody was arguing because I follow a bunch of Rutgers accounts and everybody was on their soapbox talking about the Iowa game and the crushing loss and saying Gavin Wimsatt ain't it and how poor it was. The dude genuinely has no wide receiver threat.
Yeah,
Christian Dremel is a former walk-on. And then they've got a Division II transfer. And other than that, like they don't have a guy at wide receiver. Christian Dremel's the best option you have, who's been solid. Everybody else that's somewhat promising are freshmen that aren't really getting a ton of playing time right now. He just doesn't have it. Kyle Monangai and Gavin Wimsatt is the offense. So it's easy for defenses that are really good, like Iowa, to zone in on that because they go, these guys are not going to beat us outside with our corners. We're going to key in on the run. We're stopping that. Rutgers is dead in the water. There's just nothing you can do. So until they fix that.
And yet they still led Ohio State in the second half.
When you hear Mark Price for 3, it probably takes you back to Old Richfield Coliseum, Gund Arena, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Hey, this is Aaron from the Mark Price for 3 podcast. And each week, Mark and I discuss 3 topics: basketball, coaching, and of course, his faith. Subscribe to the Mark Price for 3 podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
It's crazy.
That's interesting.
Kyle Monangai was absolutely balling that game, so I wish we'd have had him like that this weekend.
Rutgers at Penn State,
but still bowl eligible.
I mean, listen, and listen, nobody would like to see Rutgers win this weekend more than you.
In my heart of hearts, I wanted to take them as my stupid genius pick so bad. And honestly, had they made it more competitive against Iowa, I absolutely would have. But when you score 0,
I guess we're at stupid genius now. We'll get to Michigan here in a second, but now that we've hit stupid genius, the J Company encouraging you to fall in love with your home all over again at the JAEcompany.com as we head into the holiday season. Give me your stupid genius
It's
pick.
dead.
If it's not Rutgers. By the way, the score on this, because I feel like we need to remember this. You get 5 points for getting the upset pick correct, plus whatever the spread is. Must be at least 4.5 to be considered an underdog. The score is 67-0.
Look, last year I was killing it on this. I feel like I got so many right. I've gotten 0 right this time.
We weren't keeping track.
I know
last
you
year.
jinxed it. You made it a game, and now I lost. So
who's your stupid genius this week? Because you are running out of opportunities.
I'm not going to win. There's literally no reason that.
You just need to find a 67-point underdog.
Oh, easy. Okay.
And then they have to win.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So I'm going to I just want to get on the scoreboard at this point. And so I know that you hate when I do this. I'm going North Carolina over Clemson. North Carolina's ranked currently, but they're like 7.5-point underdogs to Clemson.
I'm sorry. North Carolina is a ranked team that is a 7.5-point dog
against Clemson. It is at Clemson, but to me that feels like a safe.
This feels like cheating.
I need to get on the board. I got to kick that last second field goal.
I really hope
it's not gonna.
My goal is just to keep you off the board at this point.
Every single week I get so stinking close, and my stupid genius this week. I had Miami this week. Last week I had Georgia, who barely escaped. I am barely missing on these. They're not bad picks. I'm just barely missing.
You just had the flu, or it snowed a little bit.
Or
you had the
it's
sniffles.
2020, and I just dodged it entirely. I didn't make a pick because why?
Stupid genius. There were none that I liked this week. Because we have to do this segment. Iowa State.
Ooh.
+8 against Texas. Why?
Will not
because
happen.
we have to pick somebody.
Will not happen.
And it's
If
not
that
gonna
hits,
it's not going to be North Alabama against Florida State. I'm not picking that one. So
imagine scheduling that as your second to last game.
The SEC, and I realize that Florida State's ACC, but I mean, if Alabama's playing like Chattanooga, which I guess is in Tennessee, I think, it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts that the SEC is allowed to do this. And then they want to talk about other teams' strength of schedule.
Yeah.
I go, get out of here. But give me Iowa State +8. Why? I don't know. It's in Ames. Maybe there's some weird like Kinnick Stadium at night juju that kind of floats over across the cornfields. I don't know.
Not going to matter.
Let's talk about Michigan.
Okay.
I'm going to quote Coach Neuheisel on this one, who said after the game, "For those who thought that Michigan's wins might be tainted, put that in your pipe and smoke it." Again, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on this podcast. Well,
you did, so it's too late. It's too late. We've said it.
Michigan.
I said demon time. You said that.
Everybody, let's.
What a weirdo mentality. What a weirdo mentality.
Everybody started
It should
chirping.
be everybody because you guys cheated the past 2 years and half of this year.
Everybody started chirping about why Michigan was good, that, it's because they have our son. That's why they beat Ohio State twice. Everybody said, they haven't played anybody. Wait till they play somebody. And then the Big Ten decided, and I think that this stands whether you think Michigan should be punished or not, decided to look at the NCAA and go, well, the NCAA says they found no connection to Harbaugh, decided to go ahead and go, you know what? Screw it. He's suspended. Waited till the team was on an airplane and then suspended him because that's not competitive advantage for Penn State. And Sherrone Moore comes out and now has as many top 10 wins as James Franklin.
I half agree with what you just said. I do think
Michigan versus everybody.
I do think it was weak for what the Big Ten did. Going and waiting till the last minute to make that decision. Garbage. I'll give you that. Harbaugh absolutely should be punished.
For what?
He is the leader. He is the leader of that organization.
What rule was broken?
That's just the nature of the game.
Tell me what rule was broken.
They have evidence of stuff.
The NCAA has not presented evidence yet.
They don't.
Now, did Connor Stallions do what Connor Stallions did? 100%.
And he admitted to it.
The NCAA has not said that is technically broken rule.
They're still doing the investigation.
Then why are we punishing a coach?
The NCAA wasn't.
Why is the Big Ten punishing a coach?
Because the other coach that got let go came out and said, yes, I did this. And he is the leader of the organization. If you and I go and do something moronic and something to that extent, our boss is going to get pressure from that because of us, because he is the leader.
So if he has no idea that on your computer right now, you're running like this massive spy ring, is that his problem?
Hey, calm.
Sorry,
quiet.
Was that part of the tree of trust too? Oh my gosh.
Bill, you didn't hear this.
Here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at the end of the day, there shouldn't be some type of suspension or some type of fine. I'm saying the NCAA's own investigation said there is no connection back to Coach Harbaugh. Tony Petitti in his Big Ten letter said, this is not a sanction on Coach Harbaugh. Basically saying, we know he didn't have anything to do with it, but we're going to hand this down anyway without, and here's the key, without due process.
It's the nature of the game of he is the leader of that organization. I also want to add this. The overreaction to what this punishment is also weird because it is like the most minimal punishment he could get.
I don't disagree with you on that either.
Because they're not suspending him from the team for the rest of the season. He still gets to do it.
He can't be on the sideline.
He can't be on the sideline, which that does impact the game. I'm not discrediting that.
And we'll get to that too. With
where the grunt work really is during the week when you're setting up the game plan, when you're spending time working with your players, working with your coaches. You hire those coaches so that they should be able to go out and implement your game plan and make the adjustments needed.
And now you know, at this point moving forward, now you know, okay, this is now. The injunction thing is supposed to come down Friday, yada, yada. We get, okay. That's why you follow us on Twitter or X or whatever we're doing now. But yeah, I don't disagree with you, but and I guess here, whatever we think of it. Okay. We're going to disagree on this for sure. Okay. Free Harbaugh. What the Big Ten is being able to do is really phenomenal is Tony Petitti by not having the spine to either say, no, we're going to not go based on vibes, but we're going to go based on due process.
You got to check the vibes.
Or to at least go, no, this is what I'm doing, even if I think it's the dumbest thing ever, which I do, and go, no, this is what we're doing, and I'm going to hand it down on Tuesday by waiting until Friday, and then by going...
Harbaugh was already there. He was like at the team hotel just chilling.
The team got off the plane and found out. That is weak. And what Tony Petitti has been able to do is now go, everyone kind of looks at that and goes, yeah, that's kind of, even the folks that think he should be suspended look at that and go, well, that's garbage.
Yep.
And then on top of that, they look at it, Michigan looks at it and goes, there's no connection to him. We haven't had due process. This is ridiculous. Michigan's mad at the commissioner. And everyone else is going, hold on a second. He can still coach during the week? They're mad at him. Sign your name to it and say it with your chest, Tony.
I just don't think it matters.
With your dang chest. You united everybody against you. That's a miracle. Great work by the Big Ten.
It was weak to wait until that last second. You knew what you wanted to do ahead of time. Honestly, at that point, you should have waited till after the game and announced it today.
Sure.
And just started the week off because
that's good. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a poor representation for the Big Ten, 100%.
And you can say what you want about, well, he cheated, he whatever. We can disagree on that. And you can, I saw a bunch of accounts poking fun at Sherrone Moore for the emotion after the game. That's why he's emotional. It has nothing to do with, well, they did what. He's emotional because he knows how big of a game that is. Guy found out he's head coach 90 minutes before the game and now has as many top 10 wins as James Franklin, which that just warms my heart. Warms my heart.
Can we branch off for just a little second on James Franklin?
This is our podcast. We can do whatever we want, man.
I don't want it to sound like I think James Franklin is an absolutely atrocious coach, but he's an absolutely butt coach. I was fooled for years into thinking that he was just on the edge of being elite. And there have been numerous games that I've watched from him over the years where he does some stupid mistake, some horrible coaching decision that ends up costing them the game. And
we joked about it beforehand because we all knew it was coming.
Well, and we saw it last year when we were at Penn State for the OSU game. We saw it this year against Ohio State. Yep. We saw it this year against Michigan. We saw it last year against Michigan.
Man, and listen here too, like this, it's not even just the mistakes. It's the same mistake.
Yeah.
And I'll
overthinking stuff.
Here's the example. And then I'll let you keep going on this, but it's the same mistake against Ohio State. Okay. Against Ohio State, it was what, 14-6 or something? 13-6. Sorry. It was 13-6. They are on their own side of the field with like 7 minutes to go. And he went for it. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. No, you didn't.
I think that was the score at that point. Was it 20-6? Whatever.
It was never 20-6, but yeah, I know what you're talking. I know the play. I don't remember the score.
He decides to go for it, and it's just it's mind-boggling. The decision making, and this is the big thing with Franklin. When it comes to should I punt or should I go for it, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. He had a 4th and 1, 4th and 2 from near-ish midfield in the Michigan game. Michigan had just smoked the clock, and he decides to punt the ball. Like, my brother in Christ, what are you like? Thank you. What are you doing? And then in a 1-score game with what?
4 minutes to go.
5 minutes to go, where your defense has played still played very well, despite Michigan just running the ball down your throat. Decides to put the game on Drew Aller's back,
who was trash
from his own 30 on 4th and 6. I mean, you can say that the play call was. You can say that the execution from Aller was terrible. What are you doing?
Yeah,
Michigan has run the ball 30 straight times. Guess what they're going to do, James? They're going to run the ball. You're going to have to stop it either way. It is mind-boggling stuff for me.
Well, and this past weekend was the first time I legitimately took a step back and I tried to put myself in the shoes of a Penn State fan, which do not recommend. It's a bad place to be mentally. And I just thought, if I was a fan of this team, where would my limit with him be? And I think I would be at that point now where I would look at him and I would go, he is never, I think before you always thought he just needs the talent. He can get us over the hump. We can become part of the Big Ten elite. And this was the first time where it finally settled into me. And I thought, James Franklin and Penn State will never be elite as long as they are working together.
This was the dark horse national title contender.
He cannot do it. And I thought the same thing with Drew Aller at the beginning of the season. I thought, man, this kid's got a lot of promise. He's going to be dangerous for years to come. He threw the ball 40-something times against Ohio State and did absolutely nothing. The worst game of his career. Goes into Michigan. He goes 10 of 22 for 70 yards. This was the guy that was supposed to be talked up and hyped up as the best Penn State quarterback that was going to have been there in years. And I mean, you've had Christian Hackenberg, you've had Sean Clifford, who have been serviceable. Trace McSorley, who have been above average quarterbacks in the Big Ten. If I'm watching Drew Aller as a Penn State fan, I'm legit concerned now.
I disagree with you on that because I think the potential is still there. But he's not there yet. And my concern, if I'm Penn State, is far less with Drew Aller. I think he's going to work into it. It's the coaching stuff from James Franklin consistently, because if not now, when are you planning to do it? When Oregon comes in, when USC comes in, when Washington comes in, when you don't even have the hope of winning just the division now, you got to beat out everybody else. After the Ohio State loss, he got a second lease on life, right? Penn State beats Michigan this game. They are still in the thick of it.
100%.
They are absolutely still in the thick of it, because then you end up with hoping Michigan beats Ohio State. You have a 3-way tie. You still have a legit shot to make the Big Ten championship and get into the playoff. That's all you need. Look at TCU last year. All you got to do is get in. And then beat Georgia would also help too.
Yeah, show up to that championship game.
All you got to do is get in. He gets a second lease on life at home, most hyped environment.
Everything was in your corner.
Look at all the extracurriculars around Michigan. A guy finds out he's going to coach 90 minutes before kickoff. Everything is in your court. And that's what you put up, 24-15.
Yep.
Essentially 24-9. Here's the one other thing I'll say about Franklin. Don't go for 2 in the first half. What? I don't know.
Did you see him go off on the reporter about that? Or the reporter went so after him.
And well done, because he said, I think I answered your question, Dave. I don't think you did.
Yeah, you know what? I respected the heck out of that.
I don't think he did.
I respected the heck out of that.
Because again, it doesn't matter in one sense because Michigan gets the onside kick. I get that. Hindsight's 20/20. That game is a heck of a lot more scary for me. If Penn State scores that touchdown, now they're down by a score.
Yep.
Or now they're down by 7. Instead, you decide to go for 2 earlier for no reason. Then you decide to go for 2 here on the swinging gate formation. Okay, cool.
Which weird.
It's just bad stuff. Just bad stuff all around. You had a chance and you got beat by 2 scores in your own building. That's sad.
I want to clarify my Drew Aller comments a little bit more, because I think what makes me worried if I'm a Penn State fan going forward is the yips are a real thing.
Sure.
And you watched his very first game against Ohio State, and he looked atrocious.
Yeah.
This was his chance to bounce back from that, and he looked just as shaky.
And let's give credit too, though, like to kind of come back towards Michigan. Like, let's give credit to Michigan's defense
and Ohio State's defense.
Sure.
I wouldn't say that either of that was that he was. I mean, he was missing some open throws.
He did not play well, but also the way that, and Ohio State, whatever. But the way Michigan's defense played was phenomenal.
Of course, you give 0.
No,
to me,
I mean, Ohio State played well too, but this isn't about you. We already did you. Look,
all I'm saying with Drew Aller is Does he have the skill set to be elite? Absolutely. I think he's shown it against lesser opponents, but the mentality thing is such a huge part of not only that position, but football in general. I am not convinced he has that. Yeah. To me, you've got to have, I would say Kyle McCord has it, whether you agree with him that he has it skill-wise or not.
I don't.
I would think J.J. McCarthy has it. I think Caleb Williams has it. I don't see that with the Drew Aller. It would be more understandable if he was going out and still losing. I'm not holding the game result against him, although you can a little bit. That's fair.
Yeah.
But
it's a big part of it.
You've got to go out there and have a decent performance for me to believe in it. Like Caleb Williams goes out there and balls and his team loses because his defense is bad. I don't put some of those losses on him. He went out there and did the best he could.
Penn State's defense is going to keep him in every single game.
We're not seeing Drew Aller go out there, and if he went out against Michigan and threw for 230, had a touchdown and a pick, was like 17 of 24, I would go, okay, he's not there yet, but he showed glimpses. 70 yards against Michigan's never going to cut it.
Suffocated. And also, let's not forget that Rayshon Benny punches the ball out at a key moment. McCarthy picks 100%. That's a huge moment in the game.
And they had an interception, right? If I remember right.
No.
Did that get called back?
Yeah, well, yes, it did, and it was incomplete. But I mean, was that close to throwing a pick?
100%. And the same thing against Ohio State. You watch him throw 170 yards. To me, I'm concerned about that because you're supposed to be the leader of the offense. You're supposed to have that Mamba mentality at that position. And the two biggest games of his career, he's not only looked bad, he has looked, I would say, bottom tier quarterback of the Big Ten in both of those.
Michigan really shuts down Penn State on offense, and Penn State, as good as their defense is, Michigan did not throw a pass after like the 7-minute mark in the second quarter. And I genuinely, like, I appreciate you saying that because I think you could look at that and you could go, well, you know, McCarthy was like what, 7 for 8. Like the stat line wasn't great. Also, you called, I want to say at the end of the day, including the kneel down, it was 32 runs in a row. For Michigan, I don't see that at all as, well, something's wrong here. I see that as Michigan going, we're going to keep doing this until you stop us. Penn State was having a very good pass rush. Carson Barnhart was getting beat on the right side. And Michigan said, and credit to Sherrone Moore, who said, okay, I'm going to go with the guys that I know best. I'm going to go with the guys I trust. Michigan ran for 227 yards on the number 1 defense in the country. You can complain about, well, we need to be more dynamic than that to beat Ohio State. We need to do blah, blah, blah. J.J. McCarthy's proven himself.
That stuff changes game by game.
It does. J.J. McCarthy's proven himself. I'm not worried about this. That it was reminiscent, and I think someone else mentioned this too. It was very reminiscent of the 2021 Ohio State second half, where I think Michigan threw the ball 3 times, and it was Hassan Haskins until you finally cry uncle. That was Michigan's game plan in the second half here. It wasn't necessarily pretty, but my goodness, 227 yards against the top tier defense. That.
What did Blake finish with, like 140 something?
156, I think. Something. Donovan Edwards looked good.
Finally had himself. Too. I texted you because he finally had himself a decent game, a game worth bringing up.
And that's all very good stuff against a defense because they're going to see to your credit, a good defense in Ohio State. Now, are they better? I think Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan's defenses are all very comparable.
Yeah.
They're not exactly the same. They've got different skill sets. I'm still going to argue that Michigan's probably the most complete out of all of them.
I think Michigan and Ohio State are still another tier than Penn State. If Ohio State is healthy. Not by much. It's where tight. Penn State normally is. But they're reaching for the line and they just can't get there. If I'm
Michigan and we've had talk about the offensive line and can they run the ball and why aren't they showing up and is this enough? Because again, the game's next week. Everything's in the sight of the game. Everything's through that lens. To run for 227 on what I believe, the number 1 or 2 defense statistically in the country. Yeah, I'm going to feel pretty good about that.
Well, and we've got 1 game left for each of our teams. We talked about Minnesota.
2-score win on the road with everything else surrounding it. Boom.
Yeah, you got to walk away happy with that. I do think that game maybe takes McCarthy out of the Heisman unless
it drops his.
He has to come out. He has to come out and really ball out the next 2 games for him to consider it.
And here's what I love about McCarthy is when he was asked about this prior to the Penn State game, and he said, "It's a great honor, but I don't really care."
And that's fine.
And that's not a knock. That's exactly the mindset you want.
And that's not a diss towards McCarthy. No, I just think when that's the game plan, that's just the reality. Yeah. And honestly,
you throw the ball 8 times, it's going to be hard.
I would argue the same thing with Marvin Harrison when he goes out and has the game against was it Rutgers where he only had like 27 yards or something and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, a couple touchdowns, but didn't do much.
Didn't get much, but I think both of them deserve the invite. Absolutely. But they're not gonna, and even if they get it, I mean, it's becoming clear it's Penix versus Knicks. 100%, and that's honestly as it should be. Yeah. As it should be.
Michigan does play football this week.
Yes, and this was Maryland. A game. This was a game that it's not hard to read, but it is still a little bit interesting.
Against Maryland,
not because Maryland's good, and I think Michigan's in any real danger at all. But you just don't know what you're going to get. If he comes out and plays very well, oh crap, you might be in for a little bit of a sweaty afternoon.
Yeah.
But they barely beat Nebraska this past week. It was 13-10. They had to get a game-winning field goal at the end. Nebraska is cheeks. They're terrible.
Michigan beat Nebraska big on the road. Michigan just beat Penn State by 2 scores on the road. Yeah, and Maryland just got trounced by Penn State's offense. I'm always going to be concerned because there's always that fear that you run into a trap game before the game.
Yeah.
Ohio State last year is a perfect example. On the road at Maryland, right before getting Michigan coming to town, Maryland was not a very good football team, and Maryland almost did it.
Mm-hmm.
They almost did it. Now, Ohio State let them back in that game, but Maryland almost did it. So if you're Michigan, you're coming in focused, and that's maybe the one good thing about some of the, quote, distractions around the team is the players aren't overlooking anybody. The players are locked in. They know they've got something to prove. That's why this game was such a big win. Why Sherrone Moore was so pumped about it is because if you lose that game, the conversation is, well, now we know why they were good. Now we know that they haven't
even I would have been annoyed.
Like that, but that would have been the conversation.
Yeah. And it still will be a little bit.
If they lose to Ohio State, if they lose to anybody here on out, it will be. But beating Penn State, again, it's kind of the stick it in your pipe and smoke it sort of thing. I've got Michigan 34-10 over Maryland. I think Maryland scores. Maryland may score even more than that, but I really believe in Michigan's defense. 34-10 feels like a fair, hey, Maryland hangs around for a bit, but Michigan is just too big, too fast, too strong.
I've got Michigan 38, Maryland 17. I feel like Talia is good enough to get a couple of touchdowns, especially one late. But yeah, it'll be over by halftime again.
I like your pick better. Can I change mine?
You sure can.
Okay, 34.
You want to steal my stuff
on social media at Rival Pod. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to consider becoming a Patreon subscriber as well. The game next week. Go Blue.
Go Bucks.
We'll see you then.
The Rivalry is a production of River Radio Ministries. Want live updates from the show? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at RivalPod. Visit our Patreon and consider becoming a patron for exclusive bonus content, merch, and more. And be sure to follow us wherever you're listening now for new episodes every Tuesday. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend so they can listen too.